Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2015 Global Dialogue on Waste. We're proud to be conducting our panel discussions consecutively for the third year to disseminate knowledge in waste management. Today is the last discussion in the 2015 Global Dialogue on Waste, and most of our community goes to holidays after this. So happy holidays and happy New Year. And we're ending the 2015 Global Dialogue on Waste with a very special panel, all-women panel, for the first time on Be Waste Wise. And it's on a very relevant subject, which is gender and waste management. So Lucia Fernandez from WIEGO, she'll be moderating the panel, and then she'll take over from me. But before I do that, let me tell you that our 2016, next year, we will start our discussions in June, and it'll go on for 4 months. And in 2016, we'll try to understand the role that waste management plays in improving human well-being worldwide. And when we talk about human well-being, we're talking about how it can, reduce urban poverty, but also how it can improve lifestyles by reducing waste consumption. And also we'll talk about public health impacts and climate change and oceans and plastic pollution. So we'll cover a whole lot of topics next year. And so stay tuned, keep following us. And before 2016, Global Dialogue on Waste starts in June. We'll also be publishing the Waste Influencers List, both for individuals and the organizations in the months before that. So thank you very much for your support throughout 2015. And Lucia, go ahead.
Thank you, Ranjit. It's a great pleasure for me to be on the last panel of 2015. I think I was in the first panel of WasteWise 2 years ago or something like that. So it's very excited to now being closing the loop of 2015. And it's a great pleasure to have, at least right now, we have two of my WIEGO colleagues from Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, and Ana Carolina is from Brazil, and Vanessa is from South Africa. So we have a pretty international WasteWise panel, and I would like the two of you to introduce yourselves to WasteWise panel and telling us more about what you are currently doing around gender and waste, so the audience can get the chance to know more about your work around gender and waste or waste speakers. Ana Carolina, do you want to start?
Sure, sounds good. So thank you, Lucia, and thank you, Ranjit, for the invitation. It's like Lucia said, a great pleasure to be on this all-women's panel discussing such a relevant issue as gender equality and the waste picking sector. So as of now, I've been working more actively on the Gender and Waste Project in Brazil, more specifically in Minas Gerais and the state of Minas Gerais, in the city of Belo Horizonte, where we worked with women waste pickers to strengthen their leadership roles, their awareness about gender inequalities in the sector. And we did that starting from 2012, and we're doing some follow-up activities, sharing some information on the project itself. And right now I'm trying to close up what we're calling an academic practitioner's toolkit with some of the learnings and insights from the specific project, so we can share with multiple audiences. So that's what I've been doing more work on as of late.
Great. And Vanessa, what about you in South Africa?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the panel. Really great to be on an all-women's panel. Ranjit, in his introduction, said it's the beginning of the holidays in most countries. Well, in my country today, it is an official holiday. It's Reconciliation Day. So this is part of my holiday time. I work on the organization and representation program within WIEGO, and so obviously our focus is on building organization, building grassroots organizations, strengthening organizations, and so the work with the women waste speakers have just begun in South Africa, but earlier this year around organizing and representation. And we are at the point of women identifying what are the challenges for them, or rather being able to voice what the challenges are, because I think women, they live those challenges every day, but it's to put their challenges into context and look at them through a gendered lens, both within their private space, within the home, within their community, within their workspace, and also within their waste picker organization. So that's what we're doing, is helping women to contextualize their experiences from a gender perspective. And obviously the next step is then to empower women to begin to address some of those challenges, both in the private and the workspace.
Great, many thanks. Sonia Dias will be joining us shortly. So meanwhile, I just want to briefly explain the audience about the importance of the work you are doing. As you probably know, working with waste pickers is something that has become a very important issue over the past, let's say, 20 years, more or less. And it's very recent that we have been seeing this importance of getting closer to gender components around waste, and that's probably one of the reasons why WasteWise it's become also interesting, that topic, because we have not yet too much background and information about which are the challenges and the learnings women waste pickers are facing and how to work around gender and waste. And so I would like you to share with us which has been your learning from the process of working for the first time, in the case of Carolina, with waste pickers. Carolina is a gender expert from Brazil, and you have been very recently started working with waste pickers. So how you find the sector in that way? Which are your most important insights and reflection from the work you have been doing?
Okay. I think that, as Lucia mentioned, I've been doing work on gender and participatory methods with other groups of women, and this was my first time working more specifically with women waste pickers, but also men waste pickers. And I think the most important lesson was creating a safe environment for women through a participatory horizontal dialogue ever since the beginning of planning for the waste project, the Gender and Waste Project in Brazil. So it was really working with these women's time constraints, with their specific interests regarding gender, and this ties into what Vanessa was saying. The women, they're the ones that have to really express what are their concerns related to gender relations, gender inequalities at home, what are the impacts for this in the workplace, in their national movement. So it was really just first hearing women and men on what their thoughts were about gender inequalities, what they understood to be gender, and then trying to work together with them in a very participatory manner so that they could own the project itself, so they could believe in the project and the steps that we were taking. The design of the workshops were all through the input of these women waste pickers and men waste pickers who also understood this was a relevant topic for the movement. So I think that was a key lesson for us, to take it slow, to understand that women also have other demands in the workplace, but at home, and so they have time constraints. We weren't pushing for deadlines. We were just really trying to work together with them so it could be a meaningful project.
And I imagine that that may have arise some challenge, but you can tell us later about that. Vanessa, in your case, you are an organizing expert. You have been doing a lot of organizing of informal workers, and not only informal workers, but workers in South Africa. So for you has been a learning process, getting to know waste pickers and also women. So what can you share with us about your learnings on that process?
You know, Lucia, I think I shared in on another WIEGO platform that my first interaction with the women waste pickers was within a workshop, so it was outside of their workspace, and they raised their challenges on the mainly women waste pickers who were there work on landfill sites, so they were expressing their challenges about their materials being stolen, about their safety, the poor environment within which they work, unhealthy atmosphere. And when I had the opportunity to actually visit a landfill site, after having interacted with some of the women who were in the workshop, it just, all of those challenges that they raised about the workspace resonated so differently when I was actually standing on that landfill site with them. You know, the women face all kinds of harassment, both by their fellow workers, by the authorities. They are especially vulnerable to sexual harassment on the landfill site, but their safety is compromised so that they can only work within well-lit areas, work within daylight, all of those. But when, like I say, they expressed all those challenges within a workshop space, but when we were together on the landfill, it resonated very differently for me. And since then, I've had a follow-up session with the women, and we unpacked some of those challenges a little bit more. So what are the issues? Why are they affecting women differently as opposed to always speakers? Now, interestingly, the request in South Africa for capacity building for the women came from the men in the South African Waste Speakers Association. The men felt that the women were not stepping forward to take up leadership positions in the organization, and they felt, look, that's what we need to do. Or having worked with women workers in formal sector for many years, I knew that was a problem, that the request was coming that way, but in the same time to work very carefully not to alienate the men that have to work with these women. Interestingly, the women in the sort of South African Waste Speakers Association dominate in leadership. In the National Committee of 12, there are 8 women, and they are all very strong women. So I'm quite surprised that the men felt that the women needed the training. Yes, there are some women who are not in the leadership structures that obviously need to be within a safe space to share their experiences. For me, that is the beginning point of any gender program, is to create the space within which women could reflect and speak about their experiences freely, share experiences, learn from each other, discuss strategies to begin to address that, and then to take it back in a way that's around building organization, building themselves, but also to build their organization, to build their leadership skills wherever they may be located. So that's how we are proceeding with the project here, is same as Anna Carolina said, is working within a safe space for women to A, express their experiences, and B, to analyze them from a gender perspective. And then the third leg of it would be then strategies of empowerment to begin to address some of those challenges. And it's not as if women are not thinking about this already, but from their waste site, what does that mean as within the waste sector? What does it mean to address, and how to address some of the challenges?
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I can imagine that the first time someone visits the landfill, it's a very moving experience. And if in addition you find all these challenges around women in particular, that must be something very unique and very special for you as an organizer. And Vanessa, what about Brazil? I mean, sorry, what about Brazil? I mean, we hear from Vanessa about these leaderships in the movement, this women leadership in the movement, which I feel is kind of unique. So what can you tell us about that in Brazil context?
Okay. It's interesting to hear Vanessa talk about the demand for capacity building coming from the men, actually. In Brazil, there was a clear demand from women waste picker leaders to have a project focusing specifically on building women's leadership positions, because while there are some strong leaders within the movement at the local and national level, they feel as if their voices are not always heard equally or given the same recognition as their male counterparts in the movement. So they really wanted a space to talk about this and to start bridging some connections with other women waste pickers who are interested in participating more in the movement, but what are their challenges given all these other gender constraints at the workplace? So it's interesting to hear Vanessa talk about this, because there are clearly some very strong, articulate, assertive leaders, and when you put some of these women who don't necessarily participate as much or are as active leaders, and they hear some of these other women talk about these experiences, it encourages them to want to learn more of what's happening in the movement and to learn from the skills that these other women leaders have. So that was really interesting in some of our workshops to have that connection. And that's why it's so powerful. And I'm going to emphasize this, Vanessa has emphasized this, but starting to work with smaller groups of women so they can really just voice their concerns, but also show how strong they are given all these problems that they do face. So there's a potential there for building their self-esteem, for these women to recognize their potential, but actually what they're doing facing all these obstacles. So they become examples for the other women who are in the group. So I think that's a strong element. And in Brazil, I guess in terms of gender inequality, at the workplace there's a clear sexual division of labor. And it was interesting to have the women say, oh, but we're advancing, we've got so many rights, we have a women president, all the women in our cooperatives are taking on any kind of activity, we drive, we pick up materials, we're sorting. And the element there was to say, okay, well, the women are taking on all these responsibilities, but are the men doing the same? Is there an equal division happening? Or is there actually something that's clearly focused as more feminine? For example, sorting in Brazil tends to be a more women waste picker activity. So that was interesting to have them start challenging some of these different roles happening at the workplace, and then taking it on to other steps. Well, what's happening at home? Is there a similar pattern? Or what's happening in the movement? Are women given the same amount of space during meetings? Is it mainly at the local level? What's happening at higher levels of negotiations? Are women participating as much? So that's when we started to really break down some gender inequalities that are taking place, despite having some strong women leaders at the local and national level of the movement.
Sonia, are you there?
Yes.
Oh, so happy to meet you, Sonia. We can see you, but at least we can hear you.
Yes.
Would you be able to please introduce yourself to the WasteWise audience and just tell us briefly what are you currently doing as a waste expert into this gender new field for you?
Hi, I'm Sonia Dias. I'm WIEGO waste specialist. And, well, I guess Ana Carolina has already talked about the project that we're doing here in Brazil. It was a pilot project where we wanted to learn how we could mainstream gender awareness into the waste picker movement. So I guess I'll stop there so that I don't repeat what Ana must have already said.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. I asked both Vanessa and Anna about their personal learnings from that process of working for the first time with women waste pickers, and you are a very well-known waste expert, so it would be good to hear your insights of your recent work with the women waste pickers.
Well, I think one thing that for me was very interesting, because being a waste expert, but not exactly a gender expert, it was how important it is for us, especially for us at WIEGO, because we at WIEGO are very much committed to improving the conditions and the livelihoods of informal workers. So for me it was a really great learning to learn how particularly important it is to address gender within women waste pickers, because I realized that without acknowledging, without identifying and addressing the needs practical and strategic needs of women WAY speakers, we might end up unintentionally reproducing gender inequality. And so for me, it was a process that I learned a great deal. And today I'm very convinced that the empowerment of informal workers and informal WAY speakers, you need to address gender, to actually substantiate empowerment. This was for me, the greatest learning.
Mm. Thank you, Sonia. Yes, I said that for us working with way speakers for more than a decade, at least in my case, we realized the importance of getting to understand how better and needful is to work with women within this sector. And a question I have for both of you is about what what can you say in terms of methods or process? For example, if I want to start working with women with speakers, what do you think are the key things we should do in order to address the challenge of working with them? Anna, do you want to start?
Okay, sure. I think I've already mentioned this, but really start discussing with women what they feel are their main concerns, and trying to designate what are some key issues that you could begin working on more specifically. For us,
you said small groups, right? You mentioned the importance of having small groups.
Yes, and I think what we did, we had 4 regional workshops with from about 12 to 20 women in each workshop. We didn't want more than that, and we chose representatives from different cooperatives, and we programmed a day. We scheduled a day. Ideally, it could be 1 or 2 days to really go through more in-depthly some of these issues. But we really tried to show the connections between gender inequalities, gender relations within the home, within the workplace, within the movement, and society at large, to try to show the connections between these 3 or 4 different levels of interactions, what happens, and to start breaking down some of the conceptions that these women have. And it's interesting that women start identifying some of their own patterns in producing gender inequality. So I think it really is providing these women with a small, safe environment to express their concerns. And then you'll really have women sharing some personal stories of hardships, of dealing with issues such as gender violence, harassment, and it's really important to have a team that's also prepared to deal with these issues, but not just focus on women's victimization or whatnot. We really want to show that despite all these hardships, women really do have agency. Women are able of overcoming in their own ways some of these hardships, and that the key is to build women's self-esteem, self-recognition on an individual level, but to start creating solidarity among the women themselves, and how this can transfer from not just an individual shared experience, but to a more collective action in that sense. So we're trying to work in different levels in a small group. But you do have to have partners, you do have to have men also aware of what's going on, the discussions, the importance of this for the movement as a whole, that this is not just something for women, but that this really has an impact on the movement as a whole. So I would say that it's important to think about all the different levels of interactions.
I see. Vanessa, do you think there is something different from your experience in South Africa?
No, not really, except to echo what Anna's already said about, working with women from where they are, so locating their experiences first and foremost, but in manageable groups and mixed groups, so you would have the stronger women, the women who could, learn from the others about assertiveness, making sense for me, and that's what we have begun to do in the workshops that we've had already, is for the women then to first share their experiences, and then to analyze them. We look at them through gendered spectacles, both socially, economically, politically, and it's amazing, you know, as you sort of go through the discussions and you facilitate and pose the correct questions for women to engage with, that it's almost like, so just to give you an example, in a recent workshop that we had, the women were saying one of the challenges that they experience is that the numbers are growing on their landfill site. Every day there's more people, and that causes disruption on the landfill site. And so obviously we have to put that within an economic context. Why are there more people coming to the landfill site every day? How did you end up working in this sector? And you know, it's almost, some of the women that were in the workshop had been on the landfill site for 20 years, and it's really survivalist. But making sense, especially for the younger ones, when they reflect on how they got to the landfill site, it's really getting people to share their experiences, but then to put those experiences into context. So it's not just troublesome people or more and more people flooding the landfill site, but it's because of the economic conditions, it's because of the social conditions. In our context in South Africa, we also have to be quite careful of xenophobia, because there's a lot of migration, local migration. So, you know, we don't want that to become an issue amongst the waste pickers on the landfill site. So it's really making sense of their challenges, both economically, like I say, really multidimensional, socially, economically, politically, and then really to build solidarity rather than division amongst the women. So to get that sense of, we experience these issues, they affect us all very similarly. The reasons why we engage in this type of work is very similar. And then how do we collectively mobilize and organize to strengthen ourselves as women? Where we differ between South Africa and Brazil is, I think, the waste pickers movement is much further developed in Brazil. So the challenges that women express here are not that much about the waste picker organization. It's more about the workspace, you know, so it'd be the personal and the workspace, not so much about the dynamics in the movement yet.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. Can I fit in?
Sonia, yes, definitely, and I want you to tell us.
I just want to comment first, Lucia, because I think there is one very important thing that we have to stress when working with women, informal workers, and I think the key thing for me, at least in the experience that we had in Brazil, was that we were very careful in terms of respecting women's space when we started framing activities. We actually engaged them in an exploratory work and meetings, so that we really learned from them, you know, at what pace we could go, you know, and what kind of activities they really wanted. And the other thing is, it's very important, as you know, stressing what Anna said earlier, to engage key male leaders, but we have to be very careful as to when and how we engage them, because there is the right timing. Otherwise, women get afraid of speaking for, you know, for themselves. So there is this kind of, you know, you have to be very strategic, and you have to feel, you know, it's you have your methods and you have your conceptual framework, but I think working with gender, you need to recruit much more than methods. You know, it's methods, but some kind of intuitive knowledge. You know, you have to trust your guts and follow it, you know, because otherwise you have very beautiful methods, but sometimes you end up, you know, not exactly arriving where you want to arrive at.
That's very important, Sonia. Thanks for your contribution, because we did not talk yet about timing within the process, and be careful about how how we manage those timings when we are working from the outside in terms of different kind of projects. And that's very important contribution. And what I want you to tell us, if within the process of working with women with speakers, have you already find some change, some good change in terms of the leadership you have been dealing and working with? If there is some good story you want to tell the audience to encourage us to work within the same direction?
Well, many actually,
Well, you can pick one, so then
Okay.
Ana Carolina can pick the other one.
I think for me, I'll pick the story of a leader, Madalena Duarte. She's very well known, and she has, she's very respected for the work she has been doing for, decades, nearly 3 decades here in Brazil. And I remember very well when she started. She was very shy, she was, and I remember how hard it was for her to speak up, to make the point she wanted to make. And I remember, I actually happened to be in some events where she was speaking, and I remember, sometimes some male leaders trying to maneuver her, to get her saying things that she wanted. And, as she was very shy, sometimes she went alone. And now, it's very happy for us to see, how she has gained in terms of confidence, how she is now quite capable of identifying these strategies that some people do, to belittle her. And she is the first person to actually identify what is happening. I think this is very, very important. And she has been not only a key leader nationwide, but also here, she is giving the kind of support that when you work with gender, you might end up having women confronting, for instance, domestic violence. And these women might need support that goes, beyond anything that you dreamt of, so that you have planned for. And Madalena is this very kind of, this very supportive leader. And in the occasions that we had, situations of women confronting violence, she's there, to give support, to assist these women, find the assistance they need, to get by. So I think this is, for me, it's a very interesting story.
Very inspiring. And Ana Carolina, do you have something to add from the Brazilian perspective, and then we can hear from Vanessa?
I think, in addition to what Sonia said, you do start seeing some changes or a more critical perspective from women. And when you meet them in other events, they'll always refer positively to the workshops, and they'll request some more discussion. So there's a clear interest on their part as well to continue discussions, to have this space to start identifying other problematic areas in their lives and what can be done. So as of now, we're trying to really think about other ways to build women's practical needs and some of the skills they need to overcome. But I think to also just refer quickly to what Sonia had mentioned about timing, our Gender and Waste project had various activities beyond the workshops. And one of our final evaluation moments was to have a session or an event where we invited men waste pickers from Brazil, but also women and men waste pickers from Latin America. And this was a really moving event, not only to share some of the findings and the objectives behind the discussion of gender in the waste picking sector. And I think for me, not only did we have powerful moments where women came up and started identifying what happens, but when we had actually some men starting to really reflect and say, wow, I can't believe that, you know, when my partner here in the movement, she says something about, you know, how she divides the responsibilities for her children at home, how this impacts her ability to work more at the cooperative and why she isn't earning the same as we are. So I think we both have children. We're both, you know, responsible. So I think I have to reflect more on my own attitudes at home. And I think other men started saying, oh, yeah, we do have women always complaining that we cut them off in meetings. So it was great to really see this relational aspect, that's what building gender awareness is all about. We're trying to bridge some problematic areas, not only for women, but men. And that's really, you have to do it in a slow pace, respecting women's time, but also engaging men at specific moments. So this was for me a really great way to end part of our first stage of the Gender and Waste project. So I think I'd just add that.
That's definitely very important, because we have this possibly a misunderstanding that when we work with the gender issues around waste pickers, we are tackling women. But in fact, it's very important what you just shared, Carolina, because it means we are also changing mindset from men. It's not just about getting women empowerment. It's also about changing the gender relationship, and I think it's something very valuable for us to understand. And Vanessa, do you have something to share in terms of stories that you have in South Africa about some change you have already seen within your work?
Absolutely. Some of it I don't think has got anything to do with WIEGO's support, but my belief is that struggle builds resilience. And evidence for me of that has been, even in the first workshops we've had, where the women shared some of their strategies where around, you know, they might not have had the right words within which to articulate that, but they certainly had developed strategies to overcome the gender dynamics. For example, the one cooperative recognized that they were struggling to be registered because the authorities would just not pay attention to them. So they included 2 men in the cooperative, but they made it very clear to these 2 men why they're going to be part of the cooperative, just so that they can engage the authorities and that the authorities would listen to them, because they were trying to register their co-op. But interestingly, the men were not in the leadership positions within the co-op. So the chairperson and the treasurer of the cooperative were still women, but so they had strategically engaged the men to be part of their cooperative, to go forward and register their co-op. Another example for me of empowerment, and I'm saying it, I don't think it has anything to do with our intervention, because ours is just more recent, but I've seen it even in the type of names under which the women's cooperatives register themselves. So they, you know, use names like Hope. This is a place of hope. The one that really sort of I like is it's for Itosa, which says Siyaxoxa, which means we are cleaning up. So although their work is undervalued within society, the kind of names they give themselves as cooperatives are those empowering names to say that the work that we are doing has value in society. It's small, but it's significant. It's not like, you know, survivalist type names. And you can see that in the type of women that are part of those cooperatives, how they organize themselves. So I'm saying there's already a level of struggle and resilience. I think our intervention is supporting that more, helping them make sense. You get the stronger, the more vocal leaders, and you get the more quiet ones. For example, there's a young woman whom we never knew, and she never shared this in any of the workshops. We sort of learned about it, you know, as the process went, who is on a community radio station. She's part of a recycling project, a very well-known recycling project in South Africa, but in her own quiet way has actually been building women and doing gender activism on the community radio station, where every week she raises women's issues and like what are the issues that face women waste pickers on the street, women waste pickers on the landfill side. And because she comes from the landfill side, she's able to articulate that, and they have call-ins and all the rest of that. So for me, that's encouraging, and that's the kind of experiences one wants to work with. So for the newer ones coming into the process, you can hold up examples of empowerment and what it means, and supporting each other.
Definitely. I was planning to ask you about why it is important to work with gender issues around waste, but I think your stories and your change have already answered that question pretty well. We have someone from the audience, Madame Recycles, which says that implementation of government policies that support recycling will mean wider coverage and more impact. Sonia, what do you think government policies should be if they want to include gender components? I know you have been working a lot around this issue in the past, but it's not very clear what the government policies can affect positively the life change of women around waste picker issues. So if there is some reflection you want to tell the audience around that, then we need to close the panel in about 5 minutes. So if you can just be brief about that,
Okay.
that would be great.
Well, yeah, I agree, because you see, if you take the Brazilian context, where you have a lot of interaction between governments at all levels, national, subnational, and local levels, and the national movement of waste pickers, because there are quite a few municipalities in Brazil that support inclusive recycling schemes, which means that in Brazil some governments engage and employ and hire through contracts and other formal agreements cooperatives to work as service providers. So in this context, governments can issue guidelines for cooperatives that they engage with as service providers to be attentive of gender equality, okay, within the cooperative. So I think there is a lot to be done for governments. And one of these things that inspired us in our work was to reach a point where we could have some kind of guidelines so that governments and social movements could draw from to build, to draft action plans where each within its own constituency could actually implement measures that encourage gender equality. And I just want to say something briefly before you close. I think we have to work with gender issues, attentive of the fact that for women waste speakers, gender awareness, gender project needs to be firmly rooted on their collective action. And we need to be very attentive and very careful so that the processes that we implement does not establish new divisions, men against women. So we need to be very careful about that, because we have to build, alliances with male leaders so that we actually, men and women, end up strengthening the cooperative movement or the union movement, whatever the format of organizing is in place in a given context. So I want to, these are, kind of the issues I want to flag out,
That's very important, Sonia, and I think that's why I like the example Anna Carolina shared with us about the change not only in women but also in men, and how you can work together to make that bridge less wide, and to have the two of them working together towards properly and better inclusive recycling models. I think as I said before at the beginning, my experience working with the women with speakers is very, very recently, and I get a lot of inspiration and rich information from all of you, which are my colleagues. So I really hope that the Wise audience is now ready and encouraged to follow that process, which is, as you have seen, it's a learning experience. It's also a challenging process, but it's worth to try it. I think the change that you have already experienced are really, really inspiring and useful, and I hope that the WAIS audience from WasteWise has more information and has enriched their perspective around gender and waste. So I want to thank the three of you for your time and for sharing your amazing rooted process, as you say, Sonia, with the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, Lucia, Sonia, and Vanessa for joining us today. And thanks to all of you, our community, for joining us throughout 2015. I just, before we leave for the year, I wanted to say happy holidays and happy New Year again. And please stay engaged with us for next year. We have multiple initiatives coming up, which will all help improve education. And regarding today's panel, I just had to say one thing. It was really interesting to see how belonging and empowerment kind of, engaged women and males in informal recycling. And I think that's also true for engaging any minority or the majority. So that's a good takeaway. But even in 2016, we will, as part of our exploration to understand role of waste management in improving human well-being, we will focus on informal recycling because it provides a very good opportunity to address multiple issues in improving human well-being. So thank you very much, and have a good day, good night, good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.